Hi again, and welcome to another episode of the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. I'm Tim Coulthard, Community Director at Government Transformation Magazine, and my guest today is Ruth McGuinness, who is Data and AI Practice Lead at Kainos. Ruth's joining me to explore the ethical implications of AI. There are tremendous opportunities to harness the power of AI and emerging technologies into the way we design and deliver public services, and also into some of the internal operational processes within our government agencies. But it all needs to be done in a way that is ethical, doesn't build in bias, and maintains that ever-important trust between government and citizens. Ruth's going to explain some of the issues around that and also how those foundational pieces can be put in place so that organizations can build effective, ethical AI programs. Big topic, but hyper relevant. So let's jump into that conversation right now. So Ruth, welcome to the Government Transformation Show. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great stuff. And looking forward to having a conversation around AI, and in particular, considerations around ethics and how can we build a fairer technology as we move forward, as it takes hold across public sector. Great opportunities, but we're going to make sure we do things right, I guess. So we're going to drill into some of those aspects. But before we do, let's set the scene a little bit. If you could just explain to the audience about, I suppose, your current role at Kainos, how you're working with the public sector.
Yes, happy to. So I lead the data and artificial intelligence practice at Kainos, which I'm delighted to do. And I get to work with a really great team of data specialists. Ultimately, what we do is drive end-to-end data transformation for clients in the public sector. So Kainos is quite well known in the public sector already as a digital transformation partner. And we've developed some really high-profile digital services over the last few years, including the registered vote service, apply for a passport, and the NHS app. I think most people don't realise that they've had a touch point with Kainos probably at some point, in their lives. But over the last 5 years, we've really tried to establish ourselves actually more specifically as a strategic data partner to public sector clients. And some of our data partnerships include with the DSA in the Home Office, NDEC in the National Crime Agency, Land Registry, Food Standards Agency, DSTL in the Ministry of Defence. So it's really widespread across UK government, and the work that we do ultimately there just depends on the data maturity of the individual organisations, but ultimately the end goal is the same. We are supporting these organisations into becoming, more data driven.
Fantastic. So given the list of organisations that you reeled off there, from the big beasts of Whitehall through to some of those arm's length agencies, I guess you've got a nice range of perspectives on how government is using data, where technology is sort of starting to gain traction. So hopefully some of those we'll tease some of those out as we go along. So yeah, as I said at the beginning, there's a particular focus obviously for this conversation around AI, ethical AI, and that links obviously to the fact that you and Kainos are hosting the discussion table at the forthcoming Government Data Summit around ethical AI. So I guess the obvious question is, why is that a good fit for you? Why ethical AI is important to Kainos?
Yeah, and kind of, let me explain, why it is important. So I mentioned earlier that we carry out kind of end-to-end data transformation. And by that, I mean the services that we undertake, start from data strategy and architecture through to engineering, into data visualization, and then, at the end stage of artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of the trust and ethical considerations that are actually associated with delivering those services. We see ourselves as a trusted partner that can solve the biggest data challenges for the public sector. And, a big focus of our work, yes, includes working alongside public sector clients to build their capability, but it's also about helping them to understand, the emerging data landscape, and the most emerging landscape in that, in that stream of work is ethics, ethics and trust. And I think everyone would recognize that the opportunity for artificial intelligence to transform public services is really well understood. It's well documented. It's often talked about. It can be leveraged to make organizations more efficient, to innovate, to improve citizen-facing public services. There's loads of examples out there of where AI has been delivered to the public sector in an exemplar way. And there's many of these on the Kainos website, which you can go and look at.
But any that stand out that you would want to flag as kind of shining examples?
Yeah, sure. So we delivered actually the first, what was first classified by GDS, Government Digital Services, AI Exemplar project, which was our risk rating program with DVSA, where we were trying to identify inadequate standards in MOT testing data. Yeah. So identifying anomalies in MOT test results, and trying to therefore identify anomalies, for the purposes of poor standards, but also fraud as well. So it had a massive impact in terms of service to the citizens and actually making the organization more efficient. And I think we're really actually quite proud of being the, associated with one of the first exemplar AI projects in government. And as more, organizations in the public sector go down the road of trying to leverage AI, some of the challenges associated with that are becoming, more and more notable. Yeah. I think, people start out with great intentions, to explore AI, and I think reality hits sometimes. And some of the biggest challenges are data engineering. Simply just the technical steps actually required to make data readily available for training AI models. That is an insurmountable challenge. It can be solved with the right skill sets, through leveraging partners like Kainos. But the second challenge for the public sector is actually an evolving and quite immature governance landscape associated with AI, and the kind of ethical and privacy and even moral considerations that go along with the use of this as a kind of an emerging technology. And trust in AI is mission critical to us at Kainos. It's a subject matter that I'm really passionate about. That's why I'm, sitting on the kind of ethical AI discussion panel at the Data Summit. I want the public sector to see us as a trusted partner to help them through that evolving governance landscape. And just to kind of close out, the answer is just to say that we, this is more than just kind of a talking shop for us. We're really passionate about this, and we've hired our first data ethicist. It's a new role in Kainos. It was really difficult to hire for, because actually the skill sets don't necessarily exist on the market, and it's a new role, I would say, in the UK. And the purpose of that person as a data ethicist is to focus on understanding evolving ethics guidelines and evolving governance policy for AI, and actually to apply that to our programs of work, and being a trusted partner to our clients to give them that degree of trust that we are considering this for you and we're safeguarding you. And I think it's really important to have a dedicated person actually looking at that. And we also have developed a governance framework for our AI programs, which aims to safeguard the delivery of our digital services that are AI enabled in line with the National AI Strategy, and with a particular focus on explainability and bias considerations. And we're piloting that framework right now with DSTL and the Ministry of Defence. We were awarded their AI partnership last year. So effectively, we want to ensure that we are seen as the experts in ethical AI, and we want to put the right procedures in place to protect us, but also our clients, the citizens that use their services, and to ensure that the technology is fit for purpose and sustainable. So that kind of wraps up my interest in sitting, in sitting on that table, and I really can't wait to have a discussion with others about it.
Absolutely. Data ethicist is a fantastically 2022 kind of job title. Absolutely fascinating to hear these are the kind of roles that are emerging in tech companies, but I guess increasingly in government as well. That combination of the technical, the moral, the ethical, is fascinating skill set. And as you said, maybe you have to grow your own, or you have to invent it in order to make it happen. But it speaks to the importance of these kind of issues around the evolution of AI in public sector, and I guess the private sector as well.
Yeah, just to kind of cut over you and saying, I think we might have to grow our own. And it's a really interesting role, because it's actually operating at the intersect of policy, technology, but also psychology, moral ethic, policy, technology. It's such an interesting role.
Yeah.
And I think it was difficult for us to find that person. I can't wait until they, actually come into the organization. And I think we will have to start looking at, how do we actually grow our own,
Yeah.
because this is a role that didn't exist a
No
year
doubt.
ago.
No doubt, at the vanguard of something completely different. So I can
Yeah.
imagine that has its challenges. So you mentioned some successful use cases, and that VVSA one is rightly celebrated. And I think it's good to show that the AI is actually having an impact on people every day already. It's not just something lurking in the darkness. So in terms of that wider use of AI in government, how and I realize we're sort of generalizing, but how do you think government organizations are currently balancing, I suppose, opportunity on one hand versus those moral and ethical concerns? Because it's a tightrope between optimizing and discovering new ways of doing things versus making sure that obviously that foundation, that contract of trust, if you like, between government and citizens remains in place. There's nothing untoward, and there's no, trust doesn't erode, because without that, there's very little sort of in that relationship. So how do you think that's sort of happening now? And do you have a sense of what good looks like potentially?
Yeah. So I think that the public sector is approaching it with the right degree of careful consideration. I would say what I mean by that is that I think many of the well-known AI projects in government have been operational efficiency focused, document review, internal time savings focused. We have a project with Land Registry where we were using NLP to, review large documents, in a shorter amount of time than, a human reviewer could. These are kind of fairly safe programs where actually the potential ethical impact to citizens is low or basically zero, when citizen data isn't actually involved. And therefore, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, low-risk programs of work. And I think that's represents a large degree of the programs of work that we've seen coming out of government that are AI related. And I think there's more opportunities that fall in that low impact ethical bucket that could be taken forward. I think the biggest opportunities for efficiencies, though, I think will involve citizen data. And there are the programs of work that require the most careful consideration, and we're not seeing a huge amount of movement in that space. And I think that that's totally fair. But we are seeing referenced in, government procurement, trust, ethics, alignment, national AI strategy are being called out as mandatory requirements for suppliers. So the maturity of government procurement is reflecting, I think, a desire to start to move beyond those kind of low impact programs of work and starting to explore more complex, where there are kind of citizen ethical considerations. I think we're in such an interesting place right now that, in terms of the opportunity landscape, as you mentioned, and the governance landscape. And I think over the next 6 months, we'll start to see maybe more examples emerging of what good looks like for an AI program that actually has broad ethical considerations. And I would love to see those stories emerging, without a negative lens, where we've seen, kind of some government departments, leveraging AI, and it's coming out negatively in the press because, there's a lack of understanding in terms of what they're doing. And I think I would love to see, the positive stories of AI being used for more complex programs of work. And I think we will see that.
Yeah. And I suppose off the back of that, and again, I think it's important that we talk about where there are successes, not just, trust issues or problems that, or as you say, sort of negative headlines, but where AI increasingly is used, how do you think that might affect the impact of and the relationship between government and citizens? Have you got a sense of, it's maybe one for your AI ethicist as well to throw into when they arrive, but how do you see the relationship changing and AI impacting that?
Yeah, so I love this question because it differs depending on who you ask, basically. So if you ask my family what my job is, they would probably try and explain it as something, scientific, maybe futuristic. What is artificial intelligence? I think that's a common misconception held by the general population about AI. I think more can be done, first of all, by the UK government, maybe through the National AI Strategy, actually, to improve the general understanding of what AI is.
Yeah.
Firstly, and dispel the myths around.
Why is it that every story you see about AI has those white-faced humanoid robots? Like this is
I know.
not where we're going.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yes, and actually, maybe we also feed into that. I don't know why we always use those crazy alien imagery,
Yeah.
and robots, and it's
Brains with wires coming out and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what AI is, and I'm sure actually anyone who's listening to this podcast will probably be switched on enough to understand that that's not what it is. AI is, if we're being really simplistic about it, it's just powerful pattern detection. That can help organizations be more efficient, like reading large documents more quickly and summarizing the contents. It's about just reducing repetition in business workflows. It's really similar to robotic process automation and other technologies in the automation toolkit. And it just involves simply understanding large quantities of data in different formats to help make a better decision. So there's no brains or robots really involved.
The robot army is still not marching over the horizon as much as people hope it's happening.
But on that basis, with all that being said, therefore it should enhance the relationship between government and citizens, because the purpose of it will actually be to make public services more efficient, more knowledgeable, leveraging appropriate data that's held by those bodies, and that it should be a force for good. But all that being said, citizens will want that technology to be responsible, understandable, sustainable. So what does that mean? It means that the public sector need to build AI services that are human-centric, so humans involved in the process at every stage. They need to build trust in AI. And we talked about it earlier. That means, identifying positive use cases and actually promoting them and counteracting the understanding currently of what AI is. And then I think critically important, to improving the relationship with government and citizens with the focus on AI is any AI services that we develop. I think we need to avoid them being poorly designed and poorly user tested. Ultimately to avoid systemic harms, because I think where you treat AI as a kind of standalone project and you don't treat it as a digital service, and you don't bring in user testing, you don't bring the user journey, I think you're not going to get a good outcome, basically. And the other thing is, you need to avoid poor governance and poor implementation. That's why Kainos focus on all of that. And I actually think we're quite uniquely placed, because we are well established in government as a digital transformation partner, and we therefore treat AI as any other digital service. It's not unique, and we follow the development guidelines set out by the Government Digital Service. We involve user research, design, testing, governance, and all these things ensure the sustainability of what we build, but also, help improve as an outcome the relationship and the trust between government, and the citizens that use the services.
Yeah, and you've touched on some things there, and I actually wanted to ask about what foundations to build on, if you like, in terms of building an AI program that's effective but also ethical, doesn't breach trust and so on. So what are the areas that organizations you think should focus on, if maybe at the beginning phase? What do they need to build upon in order to make sure that they're building an effective and ethical AI program potentially?
Yeah, so I think there's some differentiation to be made here between delivering an AI program and building an ethical program. So I'll answer it from the ethical lens, and I think there's a really extremely broad answer to that question that we won't be able to fit into the podcast. But luckily, Kainos have a nicely summarized version of it in a research paper that we produced recently with Tortoise Media. That provides a deep dive into kind of ethics and trust, relevant best practices, and I think it's actually really worthwhile going to find that. But at a high level, important areas of consideration for an ethical program fairness. What do I mean by that? Ensuring that you're not reinforcing bias in your data sets. If AI services are only as good as the data that they're trained on, what is being done to mitigate the conscious and unconscious bias of the individuals who originally logged that data?
Yeah.
To what extent will biased decisions be made without any recourse by data subjects to intervene or object? How are you marrying up the demographic information with your operational data to ensure assumptions aren't being made with bias towards certain groups like white males? So assessing bias in data is critical for any program. And Kainos also, it's with a different lens, but we focus on bringing diversity into our teams, to ensure that we have not just balanced experience but also a diverse range of thought, in all of our AI programs as well. So just there's a couple more. How long have we got?
No. This is these are things people need to hear. So if they're starting out on this journey, that they're obviously going to focus on the right areas.
Yeah, and like the other one's accountability, and looking at how AI services impact end users. And what I mean by that is that I mentioned it earlier. It's critical that you undertake user research as part of developing any AI program. Like, you need to understand who the end user is, what their challenges are, before you even begin to start to consider developing an AI service. And I think as part of that, you should be thinking about applying an ethical framework that has moral considerations, and working to understand how the long lasting impact of any service and as it runs. The other one probably just to say is privacy. So safety is kind of built into everything that we do, but it starts from understanding what data that you need access to understand the problem domain. So not getting access to all data, but only relevant data. Understanding if we need access to the full data set, or maybe we can use proxy data to build the AI service, therefore are kind of safeguarding, the citizen data, and, ensuring whatever decision is made there, it's clear and explainable. Particularly as we hand back service to our public sector clients, they understand it, and they understand the privacy considerations. And probably just the last one then is just inclusion. So this is really important to me. Making AI services inclusive to all, including the broadest range of citizens as possible to be able to access and test it. And this is why user research is so important, and two is assessing then a broad enough data set to ensure that the service that we develop is taking a fair approach and considers all demographic backgrounds. So, there's lots there, and like I said earlier, we have a framework that effectively considers all of these things. And, there's a lot of guidance out there as well in terms of the national AI strategy, which summarizes it in a really concise way as well.
Yeah, well, that's a great run through some of those foundational pieces that really clear where to focus and build on the right ground, as it were. So you mentioned that you've obviously some fairly celebrated examples of introducing AI in the public sector, and I suppose having played through some projects with organisations, research, other examples, I suppose I wonder if there's certain sort of top tips, which might sound a bit glib, but go to issues or challenges that you see recurring that you can flag for people now to say, these are some of the things you might always want to have front of mind. These are some of the ways to overcome those common challenges, so that they don't have to repeat the mistakes of previous projects, share the best practice and so on.
Yeah, okay. So this isn't an official tip, but I'll say this at the start, and I still have 3 after that. So the first thing is just read the national AI strategy. It's a really good foundational starting point to understand a lot of the considerations, for an AI program of work. And BEIS and DCMS and the Office for AI recently released their update to the national AI strategy, which is the AI action plan. And it's a really digestible document that kind of sets out the key considerations, and also a bit of an update in terms of where they are with it. So go find that. So first tip, I think, is, build your internal capability and understanding of artificial intelligence. And I mean either in-house, you develop those skills in-house, or through partners, or, in a hybrid model where you're developing services with your own team and a partner. And that's typically how we do it with Kainos clients. So capability, first thing, I think. Secondly, take responsibility for governing effectively. Don't just assume that it will be fine. I think that you establish an AI governance framework, which I mentioned previously. Develop practical tools and standards. Make sure that if you are working with a partner, that they also have those frameworks and tools as well, and can offer best practice for you in that space. And then I think the last one, which is probably the most important, is prepare yourself for data transformation. You cannot do AI off to the side. It will not be successful. You need to build an understanding of the data landscape in your organization. You need to identify what needs to be undertaken to prepare your organization for data transformation to become AI ready. And I always say this when people ask me, an AI program should really start life as a data engineering program, to make sure that the data is accessible. And that's they're my kind of 3 top tips.
Fantastic. I mean, at the risk of probably triggering a conversation that should be a podcast on its own, what does AI and data ready organization, what are the key features of that?
Yeah, no, we could talk about that forever. And what we're seeing in the public sector is procurements that are called like data transformation partner. That's very vague. What does that mean? It means actually that I would say public sector departments are realizing that their data is held in systems all over the organization. Maybe in some other organizations they actually can't physically access it. So it's, I think, becoming AI ready means setting out a strategy for data in your organization, setting out governance guidelines, and then getting to work on making your data accessible, clean, usable in one centralized place. It sounds simple, I've just summarized it in a sentence, but it's incredibly difficult if you think of all the disparate technology systems. So I think going through that process and then speaking to your citizens, your users, understanding what the business challenges are, once you have all of those things in place, you're ready to start to look at an AI program.
Fantastic. There you go. That sets it out pretty clearly. So that's super helpful. So yeah, we're kind of coming up towards the end, but obviously looking ahead to the Government Data Summit itself. I'm curious, I suppose, what are you looking to share with our audience? And then also flip side of that is, what are you looking to hear from them in terms of their thinking, their current activity around AI and ethical AI?
Yeah. So look, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be kind of hopefully a two-way conversation. I think we have a lot to share as a partner to government in terms of lessons learned. I mentioned before, we are the strategic data partner to a number of the largest organizations in UK government, and I think we can offer insights into some of the challenges that we faced and getting them AI ready. Best practice approaches, how to get started, how we can help them. But, conversely, I think it's a different story in every department. And, I think that I have a lot to learn, particularly in terms of where other, organizations have got to on their journey, what skill sets they have, what do they need, what are the challenges they see. And I think it's, we only have one piece of the picture, and I'd love to see the rest. Absolutely.
Yeah. That sharing, I mean, there is a great spirit of collaboration in the public sector, but there's always more, and not always the opportunities. So hopefully people are coming on the day ready to share, ready to be open about where they're at, what their challenges are, share best practice, share ideas, and so on, and everybody rise up together in terms of their capability in this area. That's the plan. So we're looking forward to it. Looking forward to hosting you and Kainos on the day. But I guess as we sort of come up against time, all that remains for me to say, Ruth, is thank you so much for joining me for that conversation.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
So there we have it. My thanks again to Ruth for joining me for that conversation, exploring ethical AI, and for sharing some of those use cases and also some of those key foundational pieces for government agencies who are looking to build AI into the way they operate and enhance services for citizens. As we mentioned, Ruth and Kainos are hosting the discussion table on ethical AI at the forthcoming Government Data Summit, 20th of October at Church House in Westminster. If you'd like to join 100 of your DDAT peers to discuss the way data is informing the future of government delivery, then just follow the link in the show notes attached to this episode to start your application process. That's about it for now, but we'll be back soon with another conversation with the public sector changemaker. Until then, goodbye.